town of Mount Pleasant is growing, and its fire department is developing a plan to keep up with that growth. I talked one-on-one with the fire chief of the town of Mount Pleasant, Mike Mixon, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Chief Mike Mixon, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you're the fire chief of the town of Mount Pleasant. And as I mentioned to you off camera a few seconds ago, you're extremely busy. And I want to rewind time because I was just right by there yesterday as I was coming back from Publix for lunch. But let's talk about the Johnny Dodds fire. I know, obviously, it's under investigation. But according to ABC News 4, on last Thursday morning, multiple fire crews responded to a major fire in the 700 block of Johnny Dodds Boulevard, and no injuries were reported. Thursday's fire obviously did considerable damage to auto money, title loans, and of course, Miss Jean's bridal shop. You said this, quote to Channel 4, to be able to stop that kind of fire where it was, to keep it contained and not down the block, that is a success story. How was this a success, Chief?
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that those businesses lost so much. But they were really close together, and the fire was quite involved when the first caller saw it. The first caller reported 20 to 30 foot flames from the roof. So crews found a large volume of fire when they got there. And being that the buildings are so close, being able to contain it to those three buildings, while it is a huge loss, it is a success that it didn't continue to spread to other buildings, because those things can happen really rapidly. So the crews deployed, put their units in good locations to put the water where it needed to be to cool those exposure buildings and really eventually bring the fire under control.
And right behind us, Mathis Ferry Road and then Ion. So yes, you're exactly right about that. Let me turn to some other news because Ann Emerson from ABC News 4 reported this, obviously about firefighters and, raises. She said this, quote, 3 weeks ago, ABC News 4 reported Mount Pleasant firefighters were still at the bottom of the barrel as far as salaries go compared to other low-country departments. The Mount Pleasant town staff commissioned a wage and compensation study, that is, for the 2020 fiscal year. A study to the tune of $48,000 from taxpayers. But when COVID-19 moved across the country, the town hit a pause button. The mayor of Mount Pleasant told ABC News 4 this, quote, "We are committed to the wage and class study and getting all of those salaries where they need to be, especially for our first responders and public service workers, who do yeoman's work every day, of course." Let me ask you this, Chief. Will your department develop a special pay incentive plan for all ranks to earn extra incentive pay for special job functions and tasks and implement it through a negotiation process?
Well, like you mentioned, the wage and comp study was actively going on in late 2019, early 2020. The town's committed every 4 years to do a wage and comp study just to compare us to other places across the state and the country. So that was going along well until COVID. And from that point, the town did take a pause just to ensure that everything was, able to be funded and we didn't have to cut jobs and things of that nature. So the town did a good job at that. But now as we come out of COVID, the town and council has recommitted to looking at that study again and seeing where we are with salaries and things of that nature. So they're actively looking at it now. They're working with the company that originally did the plan, and we hope to hear something later this fall.
And Chief, let me ask you, how do you address rates of pay to employees for the job classes of firefighter and captain?
Specifically, what do you mean, Mr. Washington?
Yeah, how do you address the rates of pay to employees for the job classes, for firefighters and captain?
Right. So all that salary information is looked at by the company, our information in Mount Pleasant, and then other local and state jurisdictions, just to see how we line up all through the ranks, from firefighter to engineer to captain and on up. They look at all that, and they're not just looking at the department of the fire department. They're looking at police and public services and finance. So they're doing it town-wide, okay. But each department does have a section in there.
And how would you, if hypothetically, continue to maintain a system of pay grades that state the minimum and maximum rates that the town will pay individuals within those job classes you just described?
So how will they be maintained?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, again, council looks at that, and that's all part of the plan about projections for the future and what they can look at and implementation over a time period. So all that is factored in there when they do these studies. And again, that's why our council is committed to it, just to ensure that we continue to be in line with other areas.
And let me talk to you about the future, and obviously your fire department. What's your 30-year comparison of the Mount Pleasant Fire Department?
So 30 years?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, wow, that's a long time. Yeah, but you're right. I think we do have to look at 30 years because things change so quickly. So right now we're going through an accreditation process. So every 5 years we create these documents, we create a strategic plan, a community risk assessment, and we submit these to an outside body. So we're actively working with them now. They're assessing our documents, and we expect them to be here in August. They come on site, they verify and validate, they do interviews, and they make a recommendation on accreditation to the board. So that's one of the ways that we, through strategic planning and community risk assessment, that we are looking into the future. How can we get better? How can we reduce response times? How can we engage the community better so that they're equipped with CPR training, they're getting the message on child seat installation in cars and things of that nature. So we take it in 5-year blocks, if you will, for strategic planning, but the ultimate goal is to look farther than 5 years down the road and come up with a plan that we can continue and we never get stagnant, that we're always innovating and keeping up with changes in society.
What are the changes in society today, Chief?
Right. So, on the fire training side, we're always looking at building materials, and cars are constantly changing with battery power and how we fight those fires, how we get people out of those accidents. So there's that operational side, but also something we really focus on: how do we reach the community with this information, with fire safety information, with CPR training, because we really want to build a community that's almost like our hands and eyes until we can get on scene. So statistics show that with CPR, for example, if a bystander does CPR before we arrive, the survival rate is much higher. So we want to work with the community. We want to educate them and engage with them so that they can kind of be like I said, our eyes and hands before we arrive, and people are safer and outcomes are better.
And have you been able to compare the previous studies to the current town of Mount Pleasant budgets, buildings, and occupancies?
Yeah, so we do look at building rates. Our fire marshal division is actively involved with the planning department. So anytime there's a new building, our fire inspectors are there looking at sprinklers and alarm systems and things of that nature. So we actively work to ensure that these buildings meet code and that they're safe for the community. And prevention is a big part of it. If we can prevent fires from happening, if we can educate people on child safety seats, if we can prevent a lot of these things from happening, not only does that reduce our workload, but the community is safer as a whole. So we do work with the planning department on building projections and new construction techniques to ensure that each building is safe, and our personnel in that fire and life safety division do a great job of those inspections.
And what are those new construction techniques here in 2021?
So the building code changes every 3 to 4 years. So we adopt the International Fire Code and the International Building Code in the town of Mount Pleasant. So it may be sprinkler spacing, it may be materials used. They may use wood a lot more than they used to, just as technology changes. And here in the low country, we have to think about seismic risk. We have to think about hurricanes. So a lot of our building standards contain so many things, because we're one of the few regions that has wind standards as well as seismic standards on top of the building code. So our inspectors and the building department has to be well versed in all those different types of things that affect buildings in our area.
And Chief, let me ask you, what these days provide direction for your department?
What provides direction?
Yes, sir.
So again, I'll go back to that strategic planning process. So we did it in 2019, and it's a 5-year process, but we want to engage the whole community. So our external stakeholders, we get input from the citizens, from our council members, our internal stakeholders being our firefighters and our chief level officers, to come up with a plan that is like a 360 view of everything for that planning and that strategic objective. So we track those throughout the year, yearly, and we really use that to, build our accreditation documents, but also be a guiding document for the future and kind of where we want to go and objectives we want to accomplish over that 5-year time frame.
And how do you build a shared vision from all ranks in your department?
Yeah, good question. So really it's about communication, and that's something that I've found that when you think you're communicating enough, you need to communicate more, because we have 7 stations, 3 different shifts. We also work with different departments within the town. So there's so many different layers that communication has to be a constant focus. And that's something that I need to work on as well, is just communicating more and getting that shared vision. So to answer your question, really just going out, watching people train, getting their feedback. Hey, this is working, this isn't, and really taking what they see on the street at the operations level, because they do the work out there on the ground and they're seeing what works and what doesn't and what's changing throughout the industry. So just really getting their input and their opinion on where we need to go and what can make things better for the department and the community.
And I was out in Oakland just a couple of days ago, and I didn't know you all had a fire station right across from Wando.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's our newest one. It's our newest. We just rebuilt Station 4 on 6 Mile, but that was a kind of a rebuild in place. But Station 6 opened in 2016 to kind of serve that Carolina Park, Wando High School, Whitehall Terrace area.
Yeah, that's an amazing area out there. Love being out there. And let me ask you this, Chief. What is changing in the fire industry as you know it?
Well, again, it's kind of, we're that catch-all department. So we kind of, hey, I don't really know what to do, call the fire department. So medical has always been a big thing for us the past 10 years. It's the majority of our call volume, but honestly, it's something that we do very well because we do it every single day. And we have paramedic capable trucks, so we can do anything an ambulance can do. We just don't transport. So that has been a trend over the last 10 years in the fire service. A lot of departments are seeing a need to step in and do medical. But even things with hazmat, different chemicals, different techniques, different types of hose that maybe can flow water a little bit better. So just staying abreast of those changes and really listening to the community and saying, okay, what's the next thing? Medical was it 10 years ago. What's the next thing that the fire service needs to do to serve the community and step in where there's a need and where there's a gap?
What are you listening to from the people at Whitehall Terrace, Oakland, 6 Mile, 10 Mile, obviously South Mount Pleasant, the old village?
Yeah, really the feedback from the community, we're lucky to live and work and serve in Mount Pleasant because the community is really good to us. I mean, everywhere we go, thank you for your service, dropping cookies by. So the community is really good. But again, it goes back to communication. We'll sit in on HOA meetings. We'll go to community events just to hear from them and what they want. And a lot of times it's just educating them on what we do. There's so many people in Mount Pleasant, over 90,000 now, that a lot of times they don't realize the extent of services that we provide with medical, with fire suppression, with hazardous materials, water rescue. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's really kind of educating them on, yes, these are the services we provide. And we do smoke detector checks, car installation, car seat installation, CPR training. So just kind of showing them the breadth of what we do and kind of educating them on that.
And what are those measurable goals and objectives that you have actually set thus far?
Right. So there's several in the strategic plan. I think there's close to 50 that we have, and they range from community education to response times. Looking at that, we've implemented a traffic system now that detects our trucks on emergency responses. So the traffic lights change based upon the direction of travel for the fire truck. So that makes a safer response because we don't have to go through red lights, but it also will reduce response times is our goal. So just looking at anything like that, and again, the strategic plan is on the Town of Mount Pleasant website for the fire department. Anybody can go look at it and see all those goals and objectives that we put in there to kind of better our department and better serve the community.
How do you identify your strengths, and are there actually any weaknesses within your department?
Oh, absolutely. I think any organization that says they don't have weaknesses, they're kind of blind and susceptible. So part of that strat plan is that we do a SWOT analysis, which is a strengths, a weakness, and opportunities and a threat. So we do look at our strengths, but we also want to look at places that we're deficient. So in that strategic plan, weaknesses are listed because we want to identify those, number one, and work towards getting them improved. So yeah, we do look at weaknesses and opportunities and different things of that nature.
And this might be a redundant question, Chief, but how have you identified areas of opportunity for and potential challenges for your department?
Right. So it goes back to listening to the community. We did a community survey. We worked with Dr. Stewart down at the College of Charleston, and she helped us develop a survey for the community and for our council members. So we gathered feedback from that, but then also having those SWOT analysis meetings and those executive level officer meetings internally to gather all that data and put that into a strategic plan.
And do you foresee the department having to scale back? This might be a silly question on responses on medical calls that are non-emergency.
We work with EMS. Charleston County EMS is our service provider as far as transport. Like I said, we're paramedic level response units. But there are some opportunities, and a couple of years ago we did scale back. For instance, and it's very small, but a non-emergency call to a doctor's office where somebody simply needs a transport from that small doctor's office to the hospital. There's no life threat. There's no immediate need of the patient. So EMS still goes, they transport, but we may stay in place just to keep that truck available for another emergency type call. So on the non-emergency calls where there's a medical provider present, we have scaled back slightly, but everything else is pretty much, we still respond to it.
And how many current members of the force are actually are that are that that you're actually that is auditing for special rescue certifications?
So special rescue certification. So we do have water rescue, like I mentioned. We have a group going up to Charlotte this week to do swift water rescue training. We have technical rescue, which is the ropes and things of that nature. So each station kind of has a specialty. So we've identified those and offer that training to people that are interested in that particular rescue.
And what rescues, yes, sir. And what new partnerships have you developed for the department?
Sure. So kind of at the most obvious level is just the partnerships we have with area departments. So we have mutual aid agreements with every department in the county. That means if we need assistance, we call them and they'll send personnel and trucks over. And same, if they need assistance, we do the same thing. So fire department and EMS, we have those partnerships. But even working with the port, working with the Yorktown on these special places where response is a little bit different, training with them, working with them, just so that, if something does happen, we're prepared for it.
Absolutely. And let me ask you this too, Chief. Will you develop a formal recruitment to retirement program to identify, prepare, mentor, and educate future leaders for the department?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, just like any business or any fire department, recruitment and retention is always a hot topic. And we're looking at how we do that. One, how do we attract that local talent, people that have roots here, but also how do we reach out and get talent from other areas that want to come to this area and work for Mount Pleasant? So yeah, we have a recruiter now. We actually have a recruitment day on August 2nd that we're joining with the police department here in Mount Pleasant. We have a great relationship with them. So it's just an open day for somebody to come ask questions and show their interest. But absolutely looking at that training and how we foster them and how we mentor them so that they want to stay with Mount Pleasant. They feel educated and they feel that they're getting a good career with the Mount Pleasant Fire Department. So we're constantly looking at recruitment, but also retention and training and really building them up and letting them be the kind of firefighter that they want to be, whatever their interest is.
And when it comes to training, in what ways are you looking at to actually innovate that?
Right, good question. So over the past year or two, we've really focused on our firefighter training. So just going back to the basics. For many years, we did medical and we trained on that. But now that it's such a frequent call and our training is really dialed in, we said, let's just get back to the basics. Throwing ground ladders, hoses, vehicle extrication, things of that nature. So our focus really has been that over the past couple of years. But then also incorporating these newer personnel like we talked about and kind of training them alongside with our current personnel so that our vision is shared. And also, like I mentioned, we have 3 shifts. So each shift kind of has its own personality, but gearing that training so that we're all on the same page, that we respond the same way, and that we're meeting the needs of the community with what we find.
And when do you foresee your department hiring more staff to address the rapid growth in the town of Mount Pleasant?
Yeah, thank you. So since 2018, the town has added 15 additional firefighters. So spots that didn't exist before, brand new spots. The town has added those. 3 of those are new this year. We've put in for a safer grant through FEMA. We're waiting to hear on that. But the town has seen a need for more firefighters, and our guidance document is through the NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association, and we're kind of looking at what they recommend per unit, and we're staffing built on that. And the town has made a good commitment for that. We have added personnel, and we're also actively hiring now for just vacancies that we have through retirement and people moving on to different jobs. So we have 4 that are starting in a few weeks. We have 4 that are coming out of a recruit class now. So it's a constant thing where we're training, we're recruiting, but also, like I mentioned, we have gotten several new positions over the past 3 years to kind of increase our staffing, and we're thankful for that.
And how do you access neighborhoods in the town of Mount Pleasant as growth continues?
Yeah, that's a good question. It goes back to working with our fire marshal division, because there are road width standards and things that our trucks need to get in there. So working with those developers, working with current neighborhoods to make sure that excessive parking on the roadways doesn't hinder our response or police response. So our fire marshal division does a great job with the planning and development phase for new neighborhoods, but also kind of helping current neighborhoods understand that we need access and shouldn't park here, you should park there.
Yeah, and this might be a silly question, Chief, but let me ask you, what is the biggest difference about responding to calls in SUVs versus the big fire trucks?
Right. So a few years ago, we went to the squad concept, which is an SUV type truck. They're staffed with 2 firefighters. So they have that firefighter training, but they also have that paramedic capability. So we have 2 now, one on Bowman Road and one on 6 Mile. The idea with that is they can get through traffic a little bit quicker. Wear and tear on a large vehicle, fuel, tires costs a little bit more. So on those kind of non-critical medical calls, we can have that smaller response unit get there, assess the scene, treat the patient. And if more personnel is needed, we can call the bigger truck. But really just getting there quicker, reducing cost, and having that unit be flexible where they can go throughout the town for medical calls. And they, like I said, they're firefighters as well. So they don't only respond to medical calls. They're a supplement to structure fires and vehicle accidents. But just having that smaller unit available to get to these certain call types quicker.
And what is your biggest fear right now about the future and the growth of the town of Mount Pleasant as you see it as fire chief?
Well, I wouldn't call it a fear. I think it's just kind of staying aware of what's going on around us. Like really looking at the community, talking to the community, working with the planning department and the building department to kind of see, hey, what's coming down in the next year, what's coming down in the next 2 years, so that we can gear our training toward that, gear our deployment models toward that, and just continue to stay educated and communicate with those people so that we're not surprised by anything and that we're ready to handle it. And we've done that and we'll continue to do that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Fire Chief Mike Mixon, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.